Okay, welcome everyone to Daf Yomi Pesachim, 1 week at a time. This is class number 8, and today we are going to be reviewing Daf 46, Memvav, through 52, which is Nun Bet, and looking forward to learning with everyone today. We have some very fundamental concepts this week. I would say, well, when we get to it, there were some, I would say, challenging concepts or, I guess, ideas that we saw this week, and I would like to discuss that a little bit with you. So let's do, let's go through, and then let's see. Let's see. So Daf 46, we finished off last week talking about that trough or a bowl that had dough to fix the like the cracks in the trough, and we talked about, is that dough considered is it considered chametz? Is it considered part of the bowl? And interestingly enough, today's daf, which is not today, the first one that we're starting with today is 46, continues and talks about a parallel idea in terms of purity and impurity. If you remember, we have discussed this in the past, that utensils can become impure, and in order to purify them, you need to put them into the mikvah, and the water needs to touch the entire utensil. And the question here, or we'll see, maybe the question here is that piece of dough that's stuck into the bottom of the bowl or the trough, is it seen as I guess like something that is just kind of plugging up the hole, or do we see it as part of the utensil itself? Again, the practical implication is that if it is part of the utensil itself, you can put it into the mikvah, and it is not considered an interruption, a chatzitza. If, however, it is not considered part of the utensil, then it is considered an interruption, and therefore it would have to be removed when purifying that utensil. Okay, so let's see. So we have a few options of what this case is. Option number 1 is, again, we're talking about the size here of that piece of dough. If it's less than an egg, right, less than a beitzah of food, if less than a beitzah of food, an egg volume, touch this dough in the bowl on Pesach, again, what we're going to make a distinction here is Pesach versus the rest of the year. If it happens on Pesach, the dough is considered significant, again, because we said last time this dough is chametz, and therefore it combines to make the shear, to make the amounts that become significant, and then it becomes problematic. But during the rest of the year, it depends if you care that the piece of dough is there, or like if you wanted to get rid of it, meaning if it's bothering you. So if you want to get rid of it, then it is considered a chatzitza, an interruption, and therefore problematic. If you want it to be part of the bowl, then it's not considered a chatzitza, and then it would be okay. Another option is that we're talking about, as I mentioned in the beginning, we're talking about actually making the utensil pure. And then again, is it considered a chatzitza, an interruption, or not? Or it's about the trough itself becoming impure. And we say, what if a sheretz, remember our hold on. Remember our sheretz, which is some creepy, crawly, right, lizard or rat. If the sheretz touches the dough, again, that dough that is in the bottom of the bowl or the trough. So then again, is it as if it touches the dough, is it as if it touched the bowl itself or not? And that is the question. And again, it depends. If it's on Pesach, then again, the dough is chametz, and therefore it is prohibited. It makes it significant. It makes it an interruption and not part of the bowl, and therefore the bowl is not impure, which is interesting, right? Different than what we said before. If it's during the year and you really want it there, then again it becomes part of the bowl, and then the bowl becomes tameh. So again, just interesting perspectives. Okay, we now have a Mishnah on 46. We have an interesting concept that is deaf bread. What is deaf bread? And one explanation is just like a deaf person, you can't tell just by looking at them if they can hear or not. So too this dough, you can't tell if it is leavened or not, if it's chametz or not. Again, maybe it hasn't risen yet, and therefore we don't know what to do with it. So the Mishnah says that if you have another batch of dough that you made at the same time, and you can tell that that one is chametz, then this one is also considered chametz. Or if it's been a while since you needed it, again, we assume that it's risen, and again, it is chametz. It is considered leavened. The Mishnah, the Gemara asks, how much time does it take for it to leaven? Like what's a while? So the Gemara says the time it takes to walk a meal. Again, a meal is what we would call a Roman mile. It's about 1 kilometer. And the Gemara again then goes on to tell us other things that are kind of measured in miles. Again, meal, not really miles, but in meal. So the Gemara says that you need to walk up to 4 meal, which would be 2 kilometers, which is almost, is that almost a mile? I don't remember. So anyway, you can do the conversions, but 4 meal is about 2 kilometers, and the Gemara says, when do you have to walk up to 4 meal to do something? One is if you have a bowl that has become impure and you want to make dough in it. Again, we want our dough to be as pure as possible. You have to walk up to 4 meal to get to a mikvah so that you can purify this bowl. Also, to daven with a community, with a tzibur. Interestingly enough, again, the importance of davening with a minyan, with 10 people. And the last thing is to wash your hands for food, right? It is customary to wash your hands before you eat bread. So if you don't have water, if you can walk for meal, then you should do that in order to get to a source of water in order to eat. The Gemara just adds, this is only if we're talking about walking in the direction that you are traveling. But if it's about going backwards, you don't even have to go 1 meal backwards. Again, the halacha, the Jewish law, being sensitive to someone who's on a journey or on the road, we don't make them go back to do something, but we do tell them that they can go forward. That's definitely a lesson in life. Okay, the next Mishnah on 46. Here's the case. We make a dough in order to make matzah. And as we know, we have to separate challah. It's funny to say that we're separating challah from your matzah, but again, to remind us, challah is the law that you have to separate a portion of your dough and give it to the kohen, to the priest. So what if your dough is impure? Now, what's the case? We have and it is Pesach already, meaning it is the festival, it is the Yom Tov, and you're only allowed to bake on Yom Tov for things that you need on the festival, on that day. So now we have a few problems. One problem is that you, again, can't bake the portion that's called Challah, the portion that needs to go to the Kohen, because you can't eat it. So I am not allowed to bake something that I can't eat. That's problem number one. Problem number two, the case is that it's impure and therefore nobody can eat it because the priest is not allowed to eat something that is impure, challah that is impure. So that is, nobody can eat it. So that's problem number one. The other side of the case is that, on the other hand, I can't leave this dough and not bake it because if I don't bake it, it's going to become chametz. So now I have a problem, right? What do we do? So there are actually three opinions. Opinion number one is I bake it and then I separate challah because when I'm baking it, when I'm baking it at the time, you could eat it. Again, a regular person can eat matzah that is impure. That's not problematic. And then you separate the challah off because again, I can't eat matzah unless that portion was taken off, and then you leave that portion. Option number two is you put the challah, the piece that you're not allowed to eat, you put it in cold water, and again, as we've mentioned previously, apparently for cold water stops the leavening process, and you leave it and you bake the other part. The other option is, the third option is, it's not a problem if it becomes chametz. Again, it's something that we can't eat, and then it's okay. We've now come to a concept which I think is very interesting. Remember, we said you're not allowed to own chametz. Owning means something that has value. That's number one. So now the Gemara says, this concept is tovat hana'ah. The word tovat hana'ah is, there's value in benefit. What does that mean? That when I take off that piece to give to the priest, to give to the Kohen, I can decide which Kohen I want to give it to. The fact that I can do that makes this piece of dough valuable because I can give it to whichever Kohen I want, and then maybe he'll feel, oh, you gave me a gift, now I don't want to use the word I owe you, but there's something valuable about giving a gift to one person over another. So again, the Gemara says, if that is considered valuable, so then I can't own that piece of dough because it is valued and it's chametz and now it's Pesach. But if I say that's not really a value, right? If I do something nice to you, you don't really owe me anything, and therefore it's not really value, and then it's okay because it means I'm not owning something of value on a chametz on Pesach. Then the Gemara says, no, that's not the issue. The issue is the issue of ho'il. We mentioned this, I think, last week. Ho'il means since, right? If I can construct a case where this would be okay, even though that hasn't happened yet, I can say since in some instance this would be permitted, so now it will be permitted even though that hasn't happened yet. One idea is, right, again, I can cook a lot because maybe I'll have guests who will come into my house, even though I don't know what the likelihood of that is. But maybe I'll have some guests so I can cook a lot, right? Ho'il, right? Since guests can come, so then I can bake a lot. So the Gemara continues on the top of 47, and we see, do we use the idea of ho'il? So we go to different cases. One case, again, as I mentioned, cooking on Yom Tov. Again, you're supposed to only cook a certain amount or bake a certain amount that you need for that day. But since maybe guests can come, so now I'm going to bake more or cook more. At the top of 47, we have a discussion about the showbread, the lechem hapanim. This lechem hapanim was baked on Friday, put onto the table, the shulchan, in the sanctuary, in the temple, and only eaten a week later on Shabbat, right? So it was there for a whole week. So the Gemara talks about if, let's say, you have a festival before Shabbat, so you're not allowed to bake the showbread on the festival. You have to bake it before the festival. The question is why? Because you're not eating it on this Shabbat. Again, I can cook this festival for the next day, which is Shabbat, but this bread is only going to be eaten a week later, and therefore it does not override cooking on the festival. Again, the next case is the shtei halechem. Shtei halechem were two breads that were baked for Shavuot. And again, they were baked before the festival. Again, it doesn't override baking on or cooking on the festival itself. Interestingly here, it says because we're allowed to cook for things that we're going to eat, but not things that are going to the Beit HaMikdash, not for Hashem. And therefore, we're not allowed to bake it on the festival itself. Again, the Gemara says that we don't use the concept of ho'il all the time. And it brings a few cases, right? The case of a person who is plowing in the field and apparently is liable for multiple sets of lashes. And I don't want to say it's funny. It's not really funny, but a very creative piece of Gemara, right? How can in one action you be liable for many, many things? Well, again, he's plowing a field that has been sanctified. He's plowing with two animals that are different species, so that's kilaim. He's planting, again, the field itself has planted in it two different species. It's Yom Tov, right? It's a festival. He's a Kohen and a Nazir, and it's in a cemetery. I don't know. It sounds like a funny joke, but it's not funny. But again, the Gemara here says, well, wait a minute, I could use the concept of ho'il because maybe he could use the dirt, the earth that he's plowing for a positive reason, right? If he needs the dirt to cover up something, right, to cover up the blood of a slaughtered bird, maybe it's okay that he was plowing. And the Gemara says, no, we don't use ho'il, we don't use that concept. Or the Gemara constructs different cases on how the dirt couldn't be used anyway, and then that is not the case. Another idea of cooking, remember Gid HaNasheh, I think we even mentioned it last week, if not 2 weeks ago. Gid HaNasheh is the sinew that we're not allowed to eat. What happens if you cooked it with milk on, right, again, it's like meat and milk on a festival? Again, you're liable for many things. One of the things that you're liable for is burning the wood. Now again, I could say ho'il, but hold on, when I burnt the wood, I could have cooked regular food for Yom Tov, which I'm allowed to do. And the Gemara says no. Again, we don't say ho'il, or I can construct a case where that, again, that is not the case. Let's say another one on Daf 48 is the top of 48, talks about taking a sheep from your field and using it for the daily sacrifice, the Korban Tamid. If you remember in Masechet Shabbat, we learned about the concept of muktzah, right? You're not allowed to use things that weren't prepared before Shabbat for Shabbat. So if you have a sheep in the field, it wasn't prepared. You didn't have in mind that you would use it on Shabbat or Yom Tov, and therefore you can't use it. It's muktzah. Then the Gemara says, no, it's not, even though it's muktzah, really, you could bring a sacrifice that the animal was muktzah because it's not intrinsically prohibited, right? It's just kind of like externally prohibited. Or we throw out this whole case and we say, again, that wood that I mentioned before when we were cooking meat and milk, maybe the wood was, again, an asherah wood, remember, the tree that was used for idol worship, and therefore that's why it's asur, and we kind of go out, we finish with that, and the Gemara again says there's really a machloket, there's a disagreement if I can use ho'il or not, right? Some rabbis say you can, some rabbis say you can't, and there's even an argument as to who the halacha follows. Okay, I'm continuing on Daf 48. The question comes up, how large a dough can you make on Pesach? Remember we talked about how large a loaf you can make on Pesach, right? How big can your matzah be? Here we're talking about the dough. Again, the larger the dough, apparently maybe the quicker it leavens. I'm not sure if there are any bakers out there. You can let me know. But it seems to be the case. So there's again a difference of opinion. First of all, interestingly, there's a distinction between wheat and barley, and how much. It seems that you can make. Some say you can make more wheat. Again, if your flour is made out of wheat, some say you can make more from wheat and less of barley, or vice versa. There are actually three different opinions, and it seems also to depend on if the grain is poor quality or good quality. Again, it seems to be a difference in the rate of fermentation. So I thought that was just very interesting. Again, then the Gemara talks about that the bowl or a basket can join the doughs together, right? If any of you are bakers, if any of you take challah, right, again, do the mitzvah of separating the challah, you know that, first of all, if I make, let's say, two separate doughs, if I put them in one bowl, that is enough to kind of unite them. If you actually make two separate bowls, you can even like tilt them together so that they touch, or cover them together, and then they are considered one unit, and you can separate challah from all of them basically at the same time. From here, so then the Gemara says, well, I understand a bowl because it kind of unites everything. What about a flat board? Can that be seen as uniting these or combining these doughs? And the Gemara says, teku, right? We're going to wait and see what will happen. We're not sure the answer. From here, the Gemara talks about three women making matzah together. And I thought the imagery is really beautiful. If anybody's ever been to a matzah factory, you can see this, how there's always this activity. Someone is always doing something. Again, our issue is we want to make sure that nothing is resting, right? Because if anything rests, it can leaven, it can ferment and become chametz. So the Gemara explains that one person kneads, then the person who is kneading goes on to like arranging her matzah. Woman number two or person number two starts kneading their dough. The person who's arranging now bakes her matzah. Woman number two goes on to arrange her matzah. Woman number three starts kneading her matzah. When the woman number one takes her matzah out of the oven, she starts again and kneads. Wow, I'm already tired. But that is the process, and I think it's just beautiful to see how everyone is working together in order to make sure that none of the dough is becoming chametz. So that is just getting us into the mood of baking matzah. Okay, next Mishnah at the bottom of 48. Again, our seor, not to be confused with seor, which is, again, we're talking here about partially fermented dough. It needs to be burned, but if you eat it by accident, then apparently it's not as problematic, meaning you don't get karet for it. And the question is, how do you know? So the Gemara talked about like the cracks in the dough, right? If you've seen a dough rise on the top, it starts to crack. So, if it has very deep cracks, we know that it is not fully, but it is considered chametz. If it has very tiny cracks, then it is that partially fermented dough. Also, if it's pale or white, again, apparently, I guess it changes color as it rises. I now haven't noticed that before. But, okay. Next, Daf 49. One second. Baruch atah Adonai Melech shakol niyeh b'dvaro. Okay. Daf 49, we have a new Mishnah. Here we're talking, what happens if the 14th of Nisan falls out on Shabbat, right? Again, we've been talking about things that happen on the 14th of Nisan. That is, right, Erev Pesach, right? The morning of the night that's going to be Seder night. That is a very busy day, right? We burn the chametz. We'll see in a few prakim, we're going to be bringing the Korban Pesach. It's a very busy day. It is not a festival, right? It's preparation for the nighttime, which is the festival, which is the 15th of Nisan. Well, what happens if the 14th of Nisan falls out on Shabbat, which is actually going to happen this year? So, take notes and pay attention, right? What do we do? When do we burn the chametz, or when do we destroy the chametz? So we can't burn the chametz on Shabbat, and therefore there are basically three opinions here in the Mishnah. Opinion number one is you burn or destroy as much chametz as possible before Shabbat, and you leave over whatever you're going to use on Shabbat, right? So this is actually the halacha, right? So if you're going to use, again, you can't use matzah on Shabbat because you're not allowed to eat matzah right before Pesach. So you're going to eat challah or pita or something small. You're going to eat it over a napkin. Make sure none of the crumbs get in your house. And on Shabbat, you're going to destroy it again in a way that we discussed a few weeks ago. You break it up, you put it into water, or you put it in the garbage. We can discuss it more as we get closer to Pesach, but that's what we do. Okay, so that's option number one. Option number two is you destroy everything on Shabbat. Option number three is you destroy the truma before Shabbat and regular chametz on Shabbat. Again, we have competing ideas. One is I want to make sure I destroy everything before, or as much as possible before Shabbat, because I want to make sure that there's nothing left over on Shabbat after I finish eating. The other option is I don't want to waste food, right? If I can eat it, so then I want to make sure that I can eat it. The Gemara says, on Shabbat, they came to say that it's time to destroy the chametz, and the Gemara says, well, that doesn't prove or disprove what the halacha is. Okay, next Mishnah, a very interesting Mishnah. Again, competing, I'm going to say competing responsibilities, let's say, or mitzvot. What's the case? If you're going to slaughter the Korban Pesach, right? Again, it's the 14th, not Friday or Shabbat. It doesn't matter. It's a Tuesday. You're going to you're going to do the Korban Pesach, or you're going to a Brit Milah. I actually was once fortunate to go to a friend's Brit Milah, which was Erev Pesach. That was a fascinating idea. We could talk about it another time. Or if you're going to in Hebrew it's called a Seudat Erusin. Loosely translated, it's an engagement party, but we'll talk about that in a minute. So if you're doing any one of these things, and on the way, right, you're already in the car, and you remember that you forgot to burn your chametz, right? Again, it is the 14th of Nisan. You need to destroy your chametz by the time by the certain time, the 5th hour, the 6th hour. And now you don't know what to do, right? Do I go back and destroy the chametz, or do I go to do the mitzvah that I was going to do? So the Gemara the Mishnah says, if you can run home, burn the chametz, run back and get there in time for the Brit Milah or for the Korban Pesach, good, right? If you can do both, excellent. But if not, and you can only do one mitzvah, so then you can go to the Brit Milah, but and what do? You nullify the chametz in your heart. Remember, we talked about, I think really in the very beginning of this Masechet, that you can, there are two ways to destroy the chametz. One is burning it, but one is also nullifying it, right? I say something, it's actually the thing that we say at Bdikat Chametz. Any chametz that I didn't find or I don't know where it is, I nullify it. It's as if it doesn't exist. So that's option number one. So that's what you're supposed to do. The Gemara continues that if you're going to save Jews from a non-Jew, or from any danger, right? I would say it's time sensitive. Then you just, even if you have time to go back to your house, you mevatel you do the nullification in your heart, and you go and you save the Jews, right? Don't waste any time. What about a non-mitzvah? What if I'm going to a non-mitzvah? So then you have to go back to your house, burn the chametz, and then, if you have time, you can go back to do that mitzvah. Interestingly, this is still all the Mishnah. The Mishnah continues that if you left Jerusalem, this is like a related but different topic. If you left Jerusalem with sanctified meat, right, something that you needed to eat in Jerusalem, and you left. So if you leave, it becomes pasul, basically invalidated, and it needs to be burnt. In theory, it needs to be burnt in Jerusalem. So what do? If you passed Sofim, and I think this means like Har HaTzofim, or the area near there, which is the outskirts of Jerusalem where you can still see Jerusalem. So if you pass that area, then you burn it in that place, right? Don't stop, burn it, and then you can keep going. But if you're closer, then you should really go back to Jerusalem and burn it on the Temple Mount, and then continue on your way. The Mishnah also finishes and says that how much of this item do you need to go back for? Again, you go back for either an egg volume, a beitzah, or a zayit, right? Kazayit, an olive. So that is the amount. Okay, so the Gemara now says, wait a minute, I understand going to do the Korban Pesach, the sacrifice. I understand I'm going to a Brit Milah, a circumcision. Then I understand it's a mitzvah. But an engagement party, is that a mitzvah? And here it's important to realize that in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, the wedding ceremony that we know today was split into two ceremonies. One is, again, what's called kiddushin. That is, right, when we go, if you're familiar with a Jewish wedding nowadays, when the groom says, Harei at mikudeshet li b'taba'at zo, right, when he does kiddushin with the ring, that was actually done before the wedding, at the engagement party, and then there was what's called nisu'in, which is the second half of our nowadays wedding ceremony. So the Gemara basically says, well, apparently there were two parties. One party, again, as I mentioned, one party is that engagement, and that is a mitzvah. The second party was later, where they just brought gifts, what we would call like either a bridal shower or like an engagement party that isn't really official. So that one is not a mitzvah, but the first one is a mitzvah. And from here, since we're talking about parties on Daf 49, the Gemara continues and says that a sage, a Torah scholar, a Talmid Chacham, should only go to mitzvah parties, right? A party that is a celebration of a mitzvah, right? A wedding, a siyum, right, where you finish learning something, but he shouldn't go to, I guess, inappropriate parties. From here, we get into some might say a challenging discussion about who is considered fit to marry somebody else. I'll leave my commentary for the end of this section, right? So here, they were talking about the daughter of a Kohen should marry a Kohen, right? Again, priests daughters of priests should marry priests. Right, priests are considered a higher level in society, and therefore she shouldn't marry down. Though afterwards it says that actually a Torah scholar should marry a daughter of a Kohen. So that is just interesting. I am blessed with 2 daughters-in-law that are daughters of priests, of Kohanim, so I am blessed that they are part of my household. But here again, the Gemara continues and says that you shouldn't enjoy parties too much because then it will send you into exile. Apparently, the 10 tribes, they partied way too much. Again, it seems to be not talking about a wedding or a proper party, but maybe something improper, and therefore they were exiled before Yehuda, before the rest of the other 2 tribes. And apparently there are many bad things that happen to Torah scholars who party too much. So if you want to know about that, read Daf 49. From here, it says that it's important to marry the daughter of a Torah scholar, right? She apparently is knowledgeable, which I think is very interesting, recognizing that women, even in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, are considered knowledgeable if they come from a knowledgeable household. Or, right, if you can't get your son to marry the daughter of a scholar, then maybe go to the daughter of somebody famous for doing mitzvot. Again, the importance of being a good person, right? Somebody who does chesed, who does good deeds to other people. If not, marry the daughter of the person who takes care of the shul or the head of a charity organization. Again, you want your daughter to marry somebody who is important, you want your son to marry the daughter of somebody important. And if not, you can marry the daughter of a school teacher, right? Again, they are also important. But you don't want your son to marry the daughter of an Amaharis. And from here, we get into, I would say, a complicated discussion about the Amaharis. So the question is, what is the Amaharis? Who is this? I would say the simple understanding is somebody who doesn't keep Torah and mitzvot. Somebody who's not religious or ignorant. I am troubled by that explanation because on this daf, on 49, it gets very, very severe. And I don't think that even in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, they felt that strongly about somebody who was not keeping the commandments. So I actually read an article that talked about this Amaharis here is somebody who really disrespects the Torah. Not someone who doesn't keep the laws, but who is anti the laws. And it seems very verbal, very public about that opinion. That's number one. Another thing the article said is, again, and if you read through this daf, it becomes very severe. So the article says maybe it's just an exaggeration, right? We do see that the Gemara does exaggerate sometimes, so maybe it's just an exaggeration. And the last thing, which I thought was very interesting, was an opinion that said the Gemara really wanted people to be encouraged to learn Torah. And therefore, they wanted to discourage becoming an Amaharis. And therefore, they were very strong in their criticism of the Amaharis. But I don't think that it means, somebody who is just ignorant. So those are three different takes on this daf. I think it's important to state because I think that when we were reading it, I don't know about you, but it makes you feel uncomfortable. And I thought that here reading this article, it made it a little bit better. I do want to mention the beautiful line on this Gemara, on 49, right? The pasuk of Torah tziva lanu Moshe morasha ki'ilat Yaakov, right? The idea that, Hashem gave us the Torah, and it is a morasha. Morasha is a legacy for us. But the word morasha is used here as me'urasa, betrothed, right? The Torah is betrothed to us, right? We are betrothed to it. And therefore, again, we love the Torah as a groom loves his bride. So I thought that was just a beautiful piece, in some of the negative things that were mentioned in this daf. Okay, moving right along, the Gemara, on daf 50 talks about future rewards. Future rewards, in the end of days versus, nowadays. And, I thought this was beautiful in my shir, in my study group, there's a woman, I've mentioned her before, Shuli Mishkin. She's a tour guide. And when we learned, this daf, wait, hold on one second. Where are my, 1 minute? Why can I not go to the next page? Wait 1 minute. Wait, hold on. Sorry. For some reason I can't share the next picture. It's not clear to me why. I'll share it again. Hold on. Sorry. Okay. Somebody took over sharing. Okay, here. Sorry. Okay, here it goes. So here the daf said, what happens in the end of days? It will be an olam hafuch, an upside down world. And this is an art piece in the Israel Museum, by an artist named Anish Kapoor, and it's called Olam Hafuch, right? And if you look at this piece, right, you basically, when you look at it straight, the image is reversed, right? The floor is reflected on the top and the sky is reflected on the bottom. So I just thought it was a beautiful idea of an Olam Hafuch, right? An upside down world. But interesting, the Gemara explains what is an Olam Hafuch, not in terms of this, meaning perspective in terms of how you see it, but in terms of values, right? The things that are valued in this world are going to become inconsequential in the next world, right? And the things that we don't take seriously or that we should take seriously in this world are of utmost importance in the next world. And the Gemara talks about people who suffered in this world, they will be revered in the next world. And again, since we're talking about the end of days, it talks about God expanding Jerusalem, and the idea, there's another verse that says that in the end of days, God will be the king of the whole land, of the whole earth, and on that day he will be one, and his name is One. And then the Gemara says, well, isn't God always one? Why do you have to wait till the end of days? But he says, no, everyone will recognize that God is one, or we will learn how to say God's name, right? God's name of the Yud and the Hey and the Vav and the Hey. Nowadays, we don't pronounce it. In the end of days, we will learn how to pronounce it. Okay, and that is the end of the third chapter. We are now going to finish, we are now going to start the fourth chapter. In the fourth chapter, the Mishnah starts talking about traditions and customs and different places. So here we go. We're on Daf 50 at the Mishnah of the beginning of the fourth chapter. And the Mishnah says, a place where, so also it's important, again, we're still talking about the 14th of Nisan. Just to remind us, this tractate, this Masechet is starting from what we do. Basically, it's chronological. We're going from before Pesach. Now we're talking about the 14th of Nisan, which is Erev Pesach, meaning the day of the nighttime will be the Seder night. And then later on, we'll talk about what happens at Seder night. That's the end of the Masechet. So again, on the 14th of Nisan, as I mentioned before, it's a very busy day. We need to finish our chametz. We need to burn the chametz. We need to do the sacrifice, the Korban Pesach, and get ready for the Seder, which is at night. And therefore, some people had a custom not to go to work on the 14th of Nisan. Others had the custom that you could go to work for half a day in the morning. Everybody agrees that from noon and on, no working, because you need to be focusing on the Korban Pesach. We'll talk about that in a few chapters. Again, so here the Mishnah says, in a place where you do work till 12, you can do work, and in a place where they don't do work, you can't do work. Now, what happens if you travel from one place to the other, right? You're going to visit your parents in another city. What do? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, here we go. So what happens if you travel from one place to another? The Mishnah says that you should take the stringencies from each place, and therefore don't do work. We'll discuss that in a minute. Also, since we're talking about customs and locations, the Mishnah says that you can eat fruit on Shemitah. Again, the sabbatical year, that is going to be next year. So for those of you who are in Israel or who are planning on being in Israel, starting from Rosh Hashanah, it's going to be Shemitah here. And you're not allowed to eat fruit or vegetables after they can no longer be found in the field. So it says that you can eat fruit on Shemitah as long as it's available to the animals in the fields. Once it's no longer available in the field, you need to destroy it, and you have to stop eating it. And this depends on where you live. We'll discuss that in a minute. Okay. Now the Gemara says, hold on. Why are we talking specifically about Erev Pesach, meaning the day of the Pesach Eve? You also need to stop working on Friday, before Shabbat, to get ready for Shabbat, or before a festival. So the Gemara says, well, for festivals, you have to stop at mincha time, meaning in the afternoon. But here you have to stop at noon. So it's earlier, so it's a separate conversation. Okay, interesting, and again, a fascinating discussion about work. And the Gemara says that, working hard and not working hard can both lead to profit. How? Depends when you're working, right? If you're working hard, if you're working hard because you're preparing for Shabbat, or preparing for the festival, you will get a reward. If you are working hard when you should be, right, if you go to work and you're an accountant, but you should be preparing for Shabbat, right, or not working because it's almost Shabbat, so you will not profit from all your hard work because you're working at the wrong time. And interestingly, the flip side is also the case because you can be lazy for the wrong reason, but get profit because you're lazy before Shabbat when you're not supposed to be working. So I thought that was just interesting in terms of work ethics and when you profit from them or not. And here, a very, very famous concept. In Hebrew, it's mitoch lo lishma ba lishma, meaning from doing something, the Torah talks about doing mitzvot, doing the commandments with intention, right? That is the best thing. I'm doing something because that is the commandment. But here on this daf it says, even, right, so again, if you do a commandment, a mitzvah for God, because that's what God commanded us to do, that's amazing. And your reward is going to be incredible. But if you do it, I would say not for the right reason, maybe because you're afraid of the consequences, or you're not really feeling it, but you do it anyway. The Gemara says you still get a reward, and you get a good reward because what happens, it's actually habit forming, right? If I do something for not the best intentions, or let's say, right, neutral intentions, but if I keep doing it and I keep doing it, eventually I will do it for the right intentions, and therefore, keep doing it and you will get reward. So the Gemara talks about different people who did things and the rewards that they get. So people who didn't go to the market before Shabbat, again, to show that they're not working. Again, another great verse. Shma b'ni musar avicha, right? Listen, my child, to the traditions, to the ethics that your father teaches you. And the verse continues, and listen to the Torah that your mother teaches you. So it's very equal, but different and interesting. But here it's talking about the importance of tradition, right? Your parents are going to pass down traditions to you. Make sure that you keep those traditions. That's on one hand. On the other hand, there is an importance to the traditions of a community. And when you live in a community, it's important to keep the traditions of that community. We'll discuss what happens when those things conflict in a minute. Okay, daf number 51. Okay, wow, 8 minutes, 2 daf. Okay, daf number 51 talks about different communities that seem to have been stringent, even though the law would have permitted them to do whatever they were doing. I'm not going to go through all the cases, but there are different cases of different communities that said something is prohibited, even though it was really permitted. And here there's a discussion that, let's say somebody who is very knowledgeable, if they go to that community, should they say something to the people of the community? And the answer is, if the community does not have a strong rabbinic leadership, right, no one who could really teach them, and it seems that they are more ignorant in their commitment to mitzvot, we do not change their customs. You let them do what they do because that's what they've always done, and you don't want to change anything. However, if they are a more, I would say, more learned community, or if there is a communal leader, then you should tell the communal leader, listen, you're preventing them from doing something that's really okay. So that was just interesting in terms of seeing the different customs of the different communities and how they dealt with it. Interesting, you also see on this daf the tension between Israel and Bavel, right? Eretz Yisrael and Bavel. They talk about how in Eretz Yisrael they were more educated at this point, and therefore they knew what was permitted and what was prohibited, whereas in Bavel, less so, and therefore they were more stringent. And then the question is, who is subservient to who? On this daf, they say the customs of Bavel are always subservient to Eretz Yisrael, meaning Eretz Yisrael, Israel is going to be on a higher level. And therefore, we see that when someone was visiting, right, Bavel from Eretz Yisrael, he still kept his tradition from Eretz Yisrael. And again, and then here comes the discussion, when do you take on the local tradition and when do you keep your own? One is, again, if you're just visiting, you keep your own, maybe. And if you're staying there, obviously you take on the tradition of the place that you are going to. And here we're going to move on to 52. 52 brings up the very, I would say, current or popular discussion of keeping 1 day or 2 days of a festival when you are in Israel versus when you are outside of Israel. For those of you not familiar, in Israel we only keep what's called 1 day of the festival, meaning Pesach is only 1 day. We have one Seder. It's 1 day. The same thing for Shavuot, for Sukkot. Again, Sukkot is 8 days, but it's really 7 days, and outside you keep 8 days. Anyway, right outside of Israel, you keep an extra day because of they were not sure what the actual day was. Again, Rosh Chodesh, when they would declare the new moon, they knew it in Israel. They didn't always know it outside of Israel. So the question is, and this comes up often, let's say somebody who is visiting from outside of Israel comes to Israel for Pesach. Do they keep 1 day or 2 days? Again, the local custom is to keep 1, but your custom is to keep 2. I am not going to tell you what the halacha is. Please ask your local rabbi, but there are many opinions. But it's just interesting because here actually on 52, we really discuss this issue. And here, hold on one second. So now we'll talk for the last few minutes about Shemitah. On Shemitah, again, as I mentioned, you can't eat any produce that is no longer found in the fields. So the Gemara says, well, what happens if in my city it is found, but now I travel and in your city it's not found? Or vice versa, meaning where do I go by? Do I go by where I am, or do I go by where I've come from? What if, I pack my lunch, and I bring an apple with me, and now I go to another city, and they don't have apples anymore. Can I eat that apple or not? There are numerous opinions here. Again, and you can see on DAF 52, do I go by the place I'm in or do I go by the place that I have left? I thought it was very interesting. It talks about what if you pickle 3 types of vegetables? And each vegetable has a different time period. In Israel next year, they actually print up a list and it says, you can eat 6-year cucumbers till this day, and 6-year, right, meaning this year's tomatoes till this day, and it goes through each vegetable when, what its time period is, which is really fascinating. So again, what if you have a barrel of, pickles, pickled cucumbers, tomatoes, and I don't know, whatever else you pickle, peppers, right? So do you go by, so there's 3 opinions, of course, because we need, one question, 3 opinions. So do you go by the earliest vegetable and then, by, the first month you have to finish it? Do you go by the last one? Or each vegetable goes by its own date? So that was just very interesting. I just want to share one more thing. I think this picture, somebody shared it on my group. I think it comes from the Koren Gemara. Here it shows remember I told you, it's based on your city. The Gemara now says it's actually based on region. And the Gemara says there are 3 regions. Here it's at the bottom. The plains, the valley, and the mountains, right? So the plain is the green. That's around Tiberias, around the Sea of Galilee, around Jericho, right? These are very low. That's the lowest points in Israel. Excuse me. This orange color is the plain, the valley. And the brown color are the mountains. You can see the Upper Galilee around Jerusalem and the Transjordan. And basically the idea of the Gemara was that animals, which again I thought just very interesting. Remember we said as long as the animals can find that vegetable, so then it can be eaten. Here it seems, right, again, the animals in each region will not go to the other region, meaning a mountain animal is not going to go down into the plain, right? The plain animals are not going to go up into the mountains. And therefore, the country is actually divided into 3 regions. And again, the Gemara continues and talks about what if you take produce out of Eretz Yisrael, right, out of Israel? Do you need to get rid of it wherever it is, or do you need to bring it back to Israel? And that is a very important question, again, to be discussed when we get closer to Shemitah, and to be discussed next week. So thank you, everyone. Not sorry. It was a lot of information. I hope it was not too quick. But wishing everybody a great week, a Shavua Tov, a Chodesh Tov. This week is the new month of Shvat. 2 weeks is Tu B'Shvat. Oh, so it's perfect. We're talking about fruits and vegetables and trees, so it is very appropriate. So wishing everyone a Chodesh Tov and a Shavua Tov.
Thank you, Rabbi.